Otherwise, he's a liar. Otherwise, he would have had to say, I came to make your life better.
Right.
What a crock. Who wants to follow that?
Right.
Not interested.
Yeah.
Too hard for that. I came to make your life better. That's not what he said.
Yeah.
I came to set you free is what he said.
And in that movement, the enemy is trying to keep them in that sin,
Yeah.
presenting things that seem pleasurable to them that may actually be pleasurable.
False peace. Yeah.
Right. And so that they stay in it. Whereas the good spirits are pricking the conscience.
He said himself, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that you might have life. He said, I came to set the captives free.
Yeah.
So what are we being set free from? One is, that trajectory of hell because we're living in perpetual sin, fundamentally. So, and then of course, all of the wounds and psychological issues that go around all that.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
I didn't know this was a fight.
That's why you're losing.
Today we are beginning either to domesticate the devil or else to deny him. He is most powerful when he is denied.
Welcome to The Devil's in the Details. The devil may be in the details, but God is on the throne.
And who are we again?
Dan and Jordan Burke.
I don't know if we ever say that.
We haven't. Yeah, I had to think about it.
That's funny. So you probably should add that to your intro.
Well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So today, what are we talking about?
We are talking about, so the last episode, we started talking about how the importance of discernment of spirits and a tool for analyzing interior movements in the battle against the enemy.
Right.
Kind of gave why it's so helpful, personal experiences with it. And then afterwards we thought, we should probably just go through rule by rule and explain that in a really easy way. Now we have a free video series that I'll link in the description so people can go watch it. We spent a lot of time getting produced and a lot of kind of stuff, but
that doesn't cover all the rules. We will though in this.
There you go.
In this effort.
Okay.
There was a great quote that I found reading the Eastern saints that I thought was really powerful. It just came to mind. It'd be good to start our time together with it. It says, this is St. Maximus, the confessor. At first, a simple thought about evil makes it into the mind. And then if it is kept in the mind, then a passionate motion arises from it. And if you do not eliminate the passion or mitigate the passion, or he uses the word extirpate, which is not commonly used, but essentially mitigate or suppress. If you do not suppress the passion or fight it, then it inclines the mind to agreement. So we have a thought, mind, passion. Now mind and passion start to cycle together down the wrong path, right? So then it inclines the mind to agreement, and when this happens, it leads the mind to the commission of the sinful deed that the thought was attempting to impose. He says, now guard your thoughts, for if you do not sin in thought, you will never sin in deed.
I like that. And what's funny is I had a quote from St. Maximus this morning that's along similar lines. No.
Well, tell me that one.
Unclean spirits increase the passion in us, making use of our negligence and inciting them. But the angels decrease our passions, inciting us to the perfection of virtue.
Wild. So let's talk about rule number 1, which is really, someone who is not managing their mind and passions. And so they're sort of living in subjugation to their mind and their passions. And for me, and it would just be not true to pretend it isn't there. I have not experienced that in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, it's not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, when you left the church, there's a point at which you started drifting, and I think you probably started drifting as you started committing more sin.
Yeah.
And then, does this, can you even, was it too much of a fog, the process of sin?
Yeah.
To even think about how this played out in your heart and mind?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I have a general idea of I can analyze and see the movements in a way, or like in a broad spectrum kind of way. I don't know of any individual moments that would serve as a good example, but in the broad context, it's, we say it all the time, sin makes you stupid.
Right.
And when you're only listening to the stupid things and you're only doing stupid things, you're going to just continue to do that.
Right.
So I don't know if that...
It's a self-reinforcing loop. So what we're talking about today as we enter into the rules, there's 14 rules. Let's just talk about the broader context. Rule number 1 is only for one kind of person, and that's who you were at that time. I was this at one time. And then rules 2 through 14 are for a different kind of person. So the kind of person or the situation of the person in rule 1 is they are struggling to... they're not struggling. They are in bondage to habitual sin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that means they're going, and somebody might say, well, what's habitual sin? I mean, do you want to take a shot at it?
Well, the church lays out 3 factors. It's something that's grave.
Oh, that's mortal sin.
Oh, you're talking about habitual.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Habitual is simply just something that you continue to fail to over and over again. I mean, that's the easiest way I can think to
and to even give more kind of detail. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It's been a week since my last confession. I've looked at porn. Bless me, Father, it's been a week since my last confession. I looked at porn. Bless me, Father. So that's what habitual sin is. And habitual mortal sin, which you were going to the mortal definition, grave matter, full assent to the will, etc. That's the worst. I mean, that's just, you're perpetually in and out of a state of grace, which is very dangerous for the soul. But that's the first rule person. The first rule person, though, is not necessary. They're not actually. Let me go to the second rule, description of a particular aspect, so you understand the distinction. The second rule says that the person is going intensely from good to better.
Mm-hmm.
So the first rule person going from habitual sin to habitual sin might be not liking it. They might be struggling against it to some degree, may go to confession, but they're not battling intensely.
Right.
And thus why they're subject to habitual sin.
Yeah.
So you were a first rule person. What's interesting, when we look at the first rule, and I'm just going to read the first rule, it says, in persons who go from mortal sin to mortal sin, the enemy will propose apparent pleasures, making them imagine sensual delights and pleasures in order to enslave them more and grow in their vices and sins. So the bad spirit works, as St. Maximus was saying, proposes a thought. I want to use the language he used because I just think it's helpful. So a simple thought about evil, it makes it to his mind, and then a passionate motion arises. So when you're in rule number 1, the thought is proposed, a passionate motion arises, and the thought, of course, in this case, is coming from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
A passionate motion arises in the person, and then they begin to entertain with their mind and the passion and the mind, and it's this sort of destructive spiral, little tornado of sin that starts to whip up in the soul. Because the enemy's proposing apparent pleasures, which then moves your lower nature to go, and your mind to go, how do we go find that, right? And to enslave you. So in these persons, the way the good spirit works is to prick and disturb their conscience through the process of reason and moral judgment. So my question to you is, when you're in that state, I mean, I know there was a period where you're sitting in a Protestant service and you're like, I miss the Eucharist or whatever, but was there, when you look back, a voice that kept saying to you, this is wrong?
Oh, yeah.
So talk about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, my testimony's out there, struggled with porn for a long time. It was not something I was ever proud of.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's something that I had to talk to guys. There's even, there's some people who hold a couple views in the church that are really detrimental to guys who are trying to overcome, because they're they're way too soft on it. And they're like, well, you might actually be addicted. And my argument to them is, are you hiding it? Okay, if you're hiding it, then it's wrong, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, and that just dismantles the argument.
Right.
It's like, that there's something that's not good about it, so we can't play these word games. I'm getting off on a little bit.
No, that's an important. It's an important thing to talk about, because a lot of times people are in bondage or stay in bondage or whatever. I mean, I remember working with a priest who was in bondage to sexual sin, and in part because of the way he was formed in seminary a long time ago, to where it was made light of or not dealt with in such a level of gravity. And then after that, the thing that hindered him was the belief that he couldn't get free.
Right.
So we want to help people to know, one, it's really bad, and two, you can get free. Why else did Jesus come but to set the captives free?
And don't accept the over psychology. And I'm beating a dead horse here. People know how much I love good psychologists, but it's over psychologized. It's, you're addicted. You have an excuse. Your culpability is limited. It's like 99% of the people. No, that's not the case. So anyway,
I've just been listening to this very fast. I love listening to Peter Attia, who's I don't know
MD, I think. Yeah.
Huh?
He's
a doc, but I don't know what his religious beliefs are. But I was just listening to a series on dopamine and what it does to the brain. But in the end, we're not just physiological beings.
Right.
We're soul, we're body and spirit, and Jesus, the power of Jesus, can overcome anything and help us to be free from anything. And he came to set us free.
Right.
He said himself, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that you might have life. He said, I came to set the captives free. So what are we being set free from? One is, that trajectory of hell, because we're living in perpetual sin, fundamentally. So, and then of course, all of the wounds and psychological issues that go around all that. Otherwise, he's a liar. Otherwise, he would have had to say, I came to make your life better.
Right.
What a crock. Who wants to follow that?
Right.
Not interested.
Yeah.
Too hard for that. I came to make your life better. That's not what he said.
Yeah.
I came to set you free is what he said.
Right.
So,
but to answer your question, I had, I can articulate it now as a pricking of conscience, that it was, I was hiding the activity. I was ashamed, all these things that come with that, felt guilty, all that was warning signs that I knew what I was doing was bad. If you're hiding it, it's bad. That's just a really easy way to describe it. But then, like I said, my conscience was being pricked. Didn't know it at the time, or in combination with, I was so steeped in sin that I wasn't interested in listening to that voice that was like, hey, this is a bad idea. You know what I mean?
Did it make you mad?
I don't remember.
Because you were very angry, you said, and I'd never understood that.
Yeah, I don't remember if that specifically made me mad. It probably did. I mean, it's
your intention.
Yeah.
Like you're against God.
Yeah. Well, you're struggling with your own flesh. Right. And yeah. And, I was baptized, so I had those graces. I was receiving the Eucharist, so I had those graces before I left. Right. So all that plants a seed. So the tension was probably far more deep than I recognized at the time. But it was, I guarantee you, it was shrouded by my anger and frustration with all the things around me. Because that's the other aspect of this, which I'm sure we'll get into, which is if the enemy can distract me from thinking about, oh, hey, what you're doing is wrong, you don't like what you're doing, he's going to do that. So you continue to engage in the activity that's leading you to hell.
Sure.
It's like, I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about why I'm angry at X, Y, Z.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah.
So the person in this rule, you were in this rule, is going from habitual sin to mortal sin, and the enemy is proposing apparent pleasures. And this is a really important point. And I don't know if you fell into this trap, or I had talked to you about it, before you moved out or something. But one of the worst teachings, one of the most common, very destructive bits of advice given to people in the church is, if you feel peace, it's from God.
Right.
And the problem is, when you're in that cycle, so the enemy proposes, let's just use sex because it's the easiest thing, a sexual pleasure to you. What does it do? it produces endorphins. It produces a physiological response that is euphoric in some sense.
Yeah.
And that euphoria feels like peace. Now, if you're not married and you're thinking about the girl you're in quotes in love with, and you know she's in love with you, you know, there's this rationalization and like, oh, well, how do I feel about this? Oh, I feel peaceful. You know, of course, doesn't last long.
Right.
Did you go through that kind of rationalization because you were active, you know, before you got married?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. Again, it's something that's really difficult to articulate. People need to know who are listening to this, or either they're going through it or they have a loved one that's going through it. Reason is not there, right? Your intellect is darkened to such an extent that you cannot really rely on intellect and reason. It's just not functioning. It's you're missing parts. You know what I mean?
Well, can I argue with you?
Sure.
But it says here that the good spirits do use reason,
right?
And argument.
Yeah, maybe I'm stating it slightly incorrectly. What I'm trying to say is the ability. I mean, we know this to be true. The ability to hear the voice of God is lessened, right? When you're in mortal sin, especially.
Yeah, sure. No,
So
absolutely true.
I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Where
Okay.
it's
it's very difficult to hear rational arguments and respond.
Yeah.
Because you keep giving your will over to the enemy, essentially. Right. Because when you're in mortal sin, what you're saying to the devil over and over is, yes, I do want your plan.
Yeah.
And what you're saying to God is over and over, no, I do not want your plan.
Right.
So somebody comes, you know, in the flesh saying, hey, this is God's plan. You're like, yeah, no.
Right. Yeah. You're a slave to yourself. Not only are you a slave to the enemy, but you're a slave to yourself. So your emotions rule over your intellect. Your flesh and your emotions rule over your intellect and will. And so it being as disordered as that is, that I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is it's very difficult to have any sort of rational outside influence because you're rationalizing yourself and whatever you're doing. You know what I mean? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, completely. So rule one person caught in this cycle, somebody says, well, if you have peace, and the thing is, kind of the antidote to this lie is, if you have peace about sin, your peace is from the devil, and the devil can give you peace.
Yeah.
It never lasts long, but he can give you peace. It's taught by the church. It's taught in scripture. St. Paul said the devil can come as an angel of light.
Right.
In the latter, there's another set of rules of Ignatius where he teaches about how the devil mimics, God and the good things of God. It's taught in also other doctors of the church, like St. Teresa of Avila. So,
well, and every sin is a twisting of something good for the most part. Like, why I was reading about Aquinas writing on why the angels fell is because they desired something that they perceived as good, and they chose that over God.
Right.
So there's still that twisting of that intellect. You know what I mean? So I think it makes it even harder for people because they're saying, well, this is good, right? This relationship that I'm having with this person is good. I'm seeing these things that I am listing as good, when in reality it's disordered and it's not good. But that's what makes it hard, is because there's a little bit of truth in there, or a mimicking of that truth that makes it so much more difficult.
Well, and you may really love the person that you're sinning with.
Right.
Yeah. So habitual sin to habitual sin versus intensely from good to better. What it might be good to do just very briefly is describe what well, I'm going to say something a little different and then go to you.
Sure.
So I'm talking to 100 plus guys heading into seminary tonight in a class I'm teaching on this very subject. One of the things I said to them in the last class is, if you are living in mortal sin, there is nothing more important in your life than getting free of that.
Right.
I don't, it's weird the way we think about sin and categorize sin and kind of rationalize. Like, as an example, if you're a married man and you're sleeping with the neighbor's wife, that means you're making a choice, you're flirting, you're developing, you're going over, you're doing that thing. Okay, now you get caught, you apologize, you renounce that, and then you do it again. And you get caught and do it again. What man would live in that?
Right.
Who was a faithful Catholic?
Right.
So, but why wouldn't he live in that? Why wouldn't he allow that? Because of the radical pain it causes his wife, because of the egregious nature that he's with somebody else's wife. He's violating God's law in this very egregious way. But porn isn't a lesser sin.
Right.
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 And I think oftentimes we just, there's this great title of a book written by one of a Protestant Calvinist guy. Don't agree with a lot of what he had to say, but his title was great. It's called The Exceeding Sinfulness of Sin. And just saying, hey, sin is like way bad, way worse than you think.
Right.
The price that Jesus paid. I mean, I remember Debbie, who works here at the Institute, just said something so powerful one day. A thorn is a thorn.
Yeah.
Into Jesus' brow.
Yeah.
Like, what's the, like, are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what it does to him.
Yeah.
And so I think once people begin to take sin seriously, and what happened to you is you wrecked your marriage, and of course you had a beautiful little girl. And so that, I don't know if that's what motivated you, just being totally crushed.
Yeah.
To go, okay, this isn't ruling me anymore. I'm done with this.
Yeah. No, that's accurate.
Yeah.
It's the pain was so deep and so real. And it's astonishing now, having gone through that, watching other people do that, but to much worse degree. And I'm not comparing by any means, but I'm just like, like I feel it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like this, and you have how many kids, and you're
right.
like, and they're how old? This
right.
is so much work, like the
right.
pain and knowing, and you mentioned this, I would say the ripple effects of the sin and what that causes. You're not just impacting your relationship, but now you're impacting the lives of your kids.
Yeah.
You're impacting in the analogy that you used, you're impacting the life of that woman and
that family. Yeah. And whoever's watching.
And then the sin carries over. So what are it's not just how it impacts your kids, but what are they going to do in the future?
Right. Yeah.
It's so dark.
I was reading a book by Father John Vertunick, and he used this phrase, the cosmic effect of sin. It just ripples through all of creation and time, and has this horrifying. Now we're talking about a sin that usually people think is pretty egregious, but a father or mother who's constantly yelling and screaming at the other, cussing, we could go down the list of different kinds of sins. And, these, when you're yelling cuss words at your wife, that's a mortal sin, calling her names or calling him names or whatever. And folks listening, if you want a good resource, if you're going, oh, wow, yeah, maybe I'm taking sin too lightly and I need the motivation of understanding it, read, it's a book called The 7 Deadly Sins.
Dr. Kevin Post.
God rest his soul. Yeah. Such a good man. It is a great book on helping you to understand, in essence, the exceeding sinfulness of sin and then how to overcome. It has some good tips in there, how to overcome. And then the other one, for those who are more advanced, is the Hidden Faults book. What is that called?
Rooting Out Your Hidden Faults.
Rooting Out Hidden Faults. McElhone or something.
I can't remember the author. Yeah, but
I mean both are
Sophia
published by
Press.
Sophia.
Yeah. If discount code DTHD20.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
DTHT20.
T20.
Yeah. I didn't know you had a discount code.
No.
You're like big time.
I don't know about that.
So I don't know.
So we've described the person that this rule is talking about. It's someone who is struggling with something serious habitually.
Yeah.
And in that movement, the enemy is trying to keep them in that sin and presenting things that seem pleasurable to them that may actually be pleasurable.
False peace. Yeah.
Right. And so that they stay in it. Whereas the good spirits are pricking the conscience. I don't think we really talked about what that looks like.
What that looks like is just, the good spirits are constantly saying to you, Jordan, this is contrary to your faith. Jordan, you're essentially cheating on your wife doing this, Jordan.
So the guilt that I kind of talked about, you know, experiencing that would be a good.
Yeah. Pricking and biting your conscience, which that doesn't sound like it feels good.
Right.
I don't know. I could prick you right now and you would react pretty negatively, or bite, you know?
Yeah.
So the words are on purpose, you know, in terms of their severity. So that's how, when you're in mortal sin, that's how, what the bad spirits do and what the good spirits do. So I think,
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So we default to mortal sin for this, and I think that's what he says, but serious venial sin as well, I would assume, is the same, falls under the same for rule 1.
Well, the enemy's voice isn't quite as loud. It's a less of a severe feeling, you know. But if you're no longer in habitual mortal sin, you're taking sin seriously, you're going from good to better. So that you're not in the first rule.
That's what anymore. I thought. I just didn't know. We're making the distinctions, and I can just imagine someone asking that question. So.
Yeah. So I think what would be good to stop here, but with one resource for folks, actually a couple. One is, you've got something on Do the Harder Thing called an immediate action plan.
Yeah, it was designed for guys who want to overcome porn specifically, but what's kind of beautiful about it, not by my design, is that the same principles that you use for overcoming that habitual sin carry over into other habitual sins. And you'll have to get a little creative, because the first, you know, it's about blocking and accountability. But if you're struggling with gluttony, then you still need accountability, you know, and the blocking may be getting the food out of your house. You know what I mean? So you have to get creative with it, but it actually applies to
where do they find it?
DoTheHarderThing.com. There's a resource page there, and you can go download it for free. You don't have to type in any information. You can just download it.
Okay. So the other one is, this one's more involved in apostolate VA. We did an extensive course on overcoming habitual sin. There's a free worksheet on how to work through that. It'll actually, if you are listening and you're struggling, if you go do that course while we're teaching this, you'll get a double dose of a lot of the wisdom.
Yeah. That's APOSTOLIVIAE.org.
ApostoleVA.org, which is our community, and it's free. It's all free. You do have to spend a little time in orientation, mainly because it's a digital monastery, if you will, and we don't allow social media behavior in there. So we have to do a lot of work up front to say, this is what this thing is about. Don't come in and just start throwing up over everybody. Be kind, be patient, you know, all of that stuff. So I think that the next time we meet, what we can do is go to rule 2 is, okay, now a person is saying, okay, I'm done, like you did. And when we do that, let's talk about what you did to be done.
Yeah. And I want to add one more thing. If someone's listening and they think that they're struggling with, if they think that they're in this place, rule 1, start going to confession.
Right.
I would say bi-weekly, if not weekly.
Yeah.
So examination of conscience.
Even.
Which we have examination in Apostolate VA. We have examination, I think, on SpiritualDirection.com. You can find one.
Yes. ApostoleVA.org, and then I think /exam, and then Spiritual Direction if you do that.
And then so the confession, and then the other aspect of that, and I don't want to, this is a whole conversation in of itself, so I just want to give a nutshell of it. But if you're taking something to confession over and over again and you don't have a plan to stop, you're abusing that sacrament, and you're not going to get better.
Right.
So if it's porn and you don't have a blocker, go to confession, confess whatever you did, go get a blocker. That's your next, that's
covenant eyes or whatever.
That's helps you. And then the next time, if it happens, all right, what did I do? And the reason I'm saying this is because just involving yourself and availing yourself of these graces is going to help you start moving from good to better.
Last resource. So we're giving them some instant resources. Blocking software or semi-instant, you know, your immediate action plan. Another one is Holy Habits, which is an app that we've developed that allows you to create accountability with other people. So you can, you know, put a goal of, you know, don't use porn, don't eat between meals, whatever your don't yell, whatever your virtue goal is, you can add someone you can be accountable to and report daily and all that.
That's also free, because I don't want people to think we're just like selling
No,
stuff.
that's free.
Everything we mentioned is free. And I don't know if you saw the newest update, but there is an examine on there now.
That's awesome.
Where you can track if you have to go to confession. It's like, here's an examine, that sort of stuff. So yeah, just start fighting. I mean, you'll see on the action plan if you get it, but it's Hebrews 12:4 in your battle against sin. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. And that's how serious you have to take this.
Amen.
And if you're not taking it that seriously, then you're not going
to get free.
You're not going to get free. All right. So looking forward to the next one. But to close, Romans 16:20, the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus be with you. Amen.
Amen.